We got some breaking news coming out of Texas today. We're talking about how doing budget cuts across the board with no plan and with reckless abandon can really have real life impacts on people. And in this round, it may have ended up affecting hundreds of people in the state of Texas, losing their life as a result of massive flooding that occurred just recently. We're going to explore whether or not and what role the Trump administration and their crazy budget cuts through DOGE and other changes had in these impacts. I'm Shant Karnikian. I'm joined by Brian Kabateck, my partner at Kabateck LLP. Show's called Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Brian, let's get into this subject.
Yeah, I want to give us a little bit of background here. So the New York Times today and my own investigation into this is produced some pretty astounding facts and information. And this is, maybe we're seeing the real world effect of what happens when you just go in, as you said, with reckless abandon and fire people. So I'm going to read some of these statistics because they're important. So the area that the flood took place in is known as Flash Flood Alley. It's been known that for a long time. So this isn't surprising. Right now, as we're recording this, we understand there are 127 deaths and 170 people missing, which is a huge human toll. And as you said, Shant, we don't have any conclusive evidence. There is some circumstantial evidence, but no conclusive evidence that the lack of staffing would have saved lives. So let's go and just explore quickly these offices. So the Houston Galveston office, which straddles the flash flood area, currently has no chief meteorologist. You think that'd be important? No science operations officer or warning coordination meteorologist, according to lists. The Austin San Antonio office, that's the area, the specific office responsible for the area that was hardest hit over the weekend, has no permanent warning coordination post, a post that would typically oversee the weather service contact with local emergency. And nevertheless, it was incredibly impressive, as the New York Times points out, that they were able to get any warning out at all. And they got a warning out supposedly about 3 hours. Now, that's not the end of the facts I want to give, Shant, before we kind of bring it home and talk about this specifically. But since Trump has become president, the leadership vacancies in both NOAA, that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Severe Storms Laboratory, and the Weather Service have more than doubled leadership positions.
Yeah.
And Neil Jacobs said that they're trying to fill some of the staff positions. He's apparently the nominee. But according to Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota, NOAA alone has lost 1,875 employees. The cuts have eliminated people. And apparently these employees that have been lost are a combined total of 27,000 years. Let me say that, 27,000 years of experience and institutional knowledge. And there are now over 3,000 vacant positions.
Yeah. And there were, I think, beyond that, there were not just people that lost their jobs, but forecasting labs were shut down, storm modeling programs got defunded, and so NOAA and the National Weather Service got hit hard by DOGE and Trump in their attempt to, get rid of wasteful bureaucracy or whatever name they would put on things. But, this is what may happen. There are real world consequences to doing that. I know that they probably look at this and go, these are a bunch of weathermen getting paid X number of dollars. We can do without them. But you got to remember, these people play a critical role in public safety. They're not just predicting whether it's going to be sunny or a little rainy tomorrow.
Right.
These are people predicting what happens.
These are like taking police officers off the street.
Yeah.
These are taking public safety officials like not having enough air traffic controllers in the towers. This is a serious problem. There's been a 27% budget reduction that's been ordered. And so, but Shant, let's bring this home to this terrible, terrible disaster in Florida, in Texas.
Yeah, I think the prediction was, so this is an area, I think you said flash flood alley. It's prone to quick, immediate flooding. That's what a flash flood is, without much warning. I think the forecasting was for it to be something like 4 inches of rain and over a foot of rain fell. And sure, maybe there was difficulty in predicting that. And to some degree, this was a natural event that happened. Obviously, no one's saying that the National Weather Service or their reduced staffing caused the flood, but clearly there was some lack of coordination in the response. Even if the forecasting can't be, or the lack of forecasting or the accuracy of the forecasting can't be blamed on the lack of funding, the lack of coordination in the response and alerting people when the flooding did start occurring or when it became occurring can be an issue. This happened overnight, so many people were asleep in rural areas, so limited cell reception. So a particularly vulnerable group of people at a particularly vulnerable point in time. So there's that to consider as well. So yes, there are some explanations as to why this was, closer to a natural disaster on the end of the spectrum as opposed to a preventable man-made event, right? But this happens all the time. And look, at our firm, we do handle natural disaster cases. We represent people affected by wildfires, people affected by flooding all over the country. And sometimes right now, we actively have multiple cases against various government entities that failed to adequately prepare for flooding that occurred. And there is possibly claims here against the government for their failures here. I know that the right is blaming nature and this is just a natural disaster. It's an act of God. I know the press secretary said that, but also there needs to be some digging into to see whether or not this could have been prevented by the National Weather Service.
Well, obviously this is an ongoing investigation, Shant. And what we know so far from our own research into this is that this early investigation is, let's start with the easy part. It is an act of God. It's always an act of God. We can have a debate about global warming and its effect on this. But when the press secretary comes out and says it's an act of God, the answer is yes, of course it's an act of God. That's why you have NOAA and the National Weather Service in place to warn people and to save lives. Because when people are there and are staffing and are doing their jobs, they save lives. So the early indication is that this 3-hour warning of a flash flood under the circumstances with the low staffing may have been remarkable. In the middle of the night, as you point out, may have been remarkable. The problem with the staffing may be that there wasn't enough people there to get the warnings out to the individuals and to the local life and safety first responders to get the word out to people in time. And obviously, it's an ongoing investigation. I just read that UCLA, where we're based here in Los Angeles, said that gaps in local communication and action plans may have contributed to the tragedy. That's an initial finding they're coming up with. There are, significant questions about the cuts, the budget cuts, and how that affected all of this. So what we know right now, look, here's a bottom line, and kind of my final thoughts on this, Sean, are that there wouldn't have been any worse situation if all of these missing positions that we outlined at the beginning of this report would have been in place. If more people had been there, it wouldn't have been worse. It could have been a lot better. It might have saved lives. And that's when you start playing with people's lives because you have some you think mandate to cut the government funding and government officials and people like that. People die. And whether they died in this situation or not because of Trump, we don't know yet. Stay tuned. So I'll give you the final thoughts on this, Shant.
Sure. And to go off of what you were just saying, when you do these budget cuts and whatever nonsense DOGE was out there trying to do and trying to effectuate, that doesn't happen from the top down. What gets eliminated is sort of what they see as low-hanging fruit, local level funding that goes down to the bottom, to the sort of what I like to call the last mile of people. They don't get rid of the whole administration. They don't get rid of the heads of an administration. What they get rid of, what seems easy to slash, is, the people that coordinate the local response, the local warning systems. And this is something that's supposed to be provided for by the government. I mean, this is America. We're an advanced country and we pay taxes. So we have these systems in place to keep people safe. And when you go around and you recklessly cut budgets and you go around and you get rid of folks and get rid of entire categories of positions within administrations like this can affect people's safety. And even if it turns out here that the budget cuts had no impact on the emergency response and there was no way to prevent this without a time machine, it doesn't matter. The problem is we shouldn't even be having this discussion. When you go around and cut budgets like that, it creates a risk for things like this to happen. So I think this is an important issue to follow. And I think that there may be broader implications here at the end of the day when a more thorough investigation is done. So we'll keep looking into this. And thank you for tuning in. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. This is Civil Action on Legal AF.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.